You're listening to the 10 Bagger Podcast, presented by the Daily Gold. Join us as we uncover tomorrow's 10 baggers today. And now here's your host, Jordan Royburn.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 10 Bagger Podcast. This is episode number 3. Today I'm chatting with my buddy, Jeb Handwerger of goldstocktrades.com. Jeb and I met, I think it was summer of 2011 on an epic mining trip to Alaska. All other mining site visits, at least in my opinion, will be measured against that one because it really was epic. Jeb, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. And how are you doing today on this Friday?
Thanks, Jordan, for having me here. It's a great time to connect with you. Yes, I remember that mine tour up to Fairbanks, Alaska, at the height of the last gold bull market, and we're one of the few guys that were around in the last, for our age that remember the last bull market when I think the Daily Gold and gold stock trades was started back in the last bull market. So we remember that potential, and I think one of the companies we were visiting was International Tower Hill Mines and the beginning of Corvus Gold, which just got a huge bought deal from BMO and is a favorite, sponsored by Anglo Gold Ashanti, Corvus Gold, when that was starting out, and that's become a big winner. So we've been around the block, you and I. We've been through both the bull markets, and I would have never thought that, maybe we would have a correction in gold, but to have a 10-year bear market in the junior miners like this, where these miners have gone to sort of epic 50-year lows according to some valuations, I would never have thought that we would head into such a decline like what we've witnessed.
Yeah, I call it the forever bear market because with respect to the junior mining sector as a whole, I mean, it really has not recovered. Some juniors have, but the sector as a whole, I mean, you were talking about the TSX Venture before we got on board here, how that's basically near all-time lows. But moving on from that, Jeb, I want to talk about 10 baggers today. That's the subject. I want to talk about your experience, what you look for, how can our listeners find 10 baggers, what they should avoid, a lot of things we can touch on. But let's talk about happy times because we both believe things are going to improve. In happy times, Jeb, I know that in 2015, I know that you invested in a few placements or a handful of placements. I mean, we've chatted several times over the years. I know that some of the things you got into in 2015, those did spectacularly well over the next year or two. Can you just share maybe one or two of your big winners and what you recall about those and how that's influenced your investing moving forward?
Well, one of the things that I looked at is commodities that may have been out of favor and that would run. So one of the areas that I looked into was palladium. Now, if you've been watching the recent move in palladium, palladium's gone parabolic. It's hit over 1,800. Some may consider it overvalued now, but it's had a significant, serious move. The palladium market, outperforming everything year to date. And in the junior space, there's very few. One of the big ways to make 10 bagger potential that, I started in this business in the late 90s, pretty much when I wanted to go into mining as a career, after I graduated high school in 1998. class of 98, I graduated, wanted to go into mining sector because at that time there was zero, like this, there was very little interest, especially coming from the New York area. And there's very few gold bugs and coin collectors, which I had an interest in. So I got into that market, and that was the first time, it was, you have to be a contrarian. So you have to get in when the prices are really low. And that, because that's when you're able to have, it's much easier to have the 10 bagger potential. And, if you got into the juniors in the late 90s or early 2000s, especially, the ones that were listed on the U.S. exchanges, it's very quick to have 10 baggers once investors started returning, and especially after the 9/11, the 2001, and the war starting. That's when really there was a huge new rush of investors and 10 bagger potential. But recently, palladium's been one that I kind of was looking into a few companies. I saw this asset. One asset in Montana, right next to Stillwater, Sibanya, that was taken over by Sibanya, and invested in it early when they got the project, and so I knew the project, knew the company, knew some of the management at an early stage, and that's one of the best ways to get those 10 bagger potential is to know the management, to know the asset, and to be a little bit lucky on the commodity. And I think that's one, the company that I'm looking at is drilling right now. And it's called Group 10 Metals, Group 10 in Montana next to Sibanya Stillwater.
Oh, so that's one you're looking at now that wasn't a past 10 bagger, just to clarify?
Oh, no, that's one that I think could be 10 bagger. I invested, I don't know, when the company got the asset, I think it was a 6 cent. Now it's trading at, I don't know, I also have a 12 cent, I think, warrant. I'm not exactly sure. You got to check, I have to double check, but one that's drilling now, and one that I think you have to look at the core and look at the, the program, the people behind the including David Broughton and Greg Johnson, guys that have built major mining companies like Nova Gold and Ivanhoe. So they're drilling now. I think it's a potential one. But I have a share position. They're not a sponsor, but I invested in it when it was just starting up.
Okay, and you mentioned something. I just want to touch on that for the listeners, because Dave Erfley in our last episode, he also mentioned the same thing. To the listeners out there, guys, it's so important to go a step further beyond just looking at the website and reading the information on the internet. You can call these companies up. You can, if you have the time, you can go to conferences and meet them. But if you can't do that, call them up, talk to them every month, build a relationship with them. That way, that is going to help you have better results moving forward. Wouldn't you agree with that, Jeb?
Yeah, and I think sometimes they listen to shareholders too, and sometimes there's projects, some of these companies own that many people don't even realize that they're sitting on, and that are very valuable. And, just by being here in this business and having time, and spending time with smart people and having those discussions, and keeping track of projects, you're sometimes able to get in early, and then if you hit the right cycle, that's when some of these, I can see it really is a game of lotto. And, these are a lot, especially in the exploration business. And, if you get into a good cycle, the odds are a lot easier. And when there's money coming in, but the key is that, if you keep track, it makes the odds a lot better. And if you keep track of the people that can really build and get that institutional money when they do hit, that's when a lot of money comes in. And if you're a retail investor and you got in early and then the company's able to follow through, then you get an institutional, or they do a big brokered financing like a company like Corvus just did, and they're at a whole new league and they're institutional stock, and they're in New York Stock, eventually when the markets get better, then they get uplisted to the New York Stock Exchange. And that's when they go from pennies, 10 cents to $1 and then $2. And then they're on the New York Stock Exchange. I remember in the last bull cycle, and then they go to $10, like Tower Hill Mines. When we were up there, it was $10. I think it's trading at maybe 30, 40 cents right now. And I remember that at a time when it was once trading at 30, 40 cents. So, and I think that probably there'll be a time, as much as people don't realize it and don't think it'll happen, there'll be a time that it might be $10 again.
Yeah, if it's still around over the years ahead in its present form, then yeah, I can't disagree with that. But let's talk about now. Aside from it, you mentioned palladium. Thanks for the pick on Group 10 metals. But I want you to talk about, because you talked about commodities and things that were out of favor. What aside from palladium, what are some other commodities that you're looking at now that you think may be coming into a new cycle over the next 5 years or so? I mean, is it silver? Is it uranium? Or is it something else that interests you? I mean, as far as those commodities, what would you be looking at?
Right now, I think the trade is in the silver market. There's a lot of silver in the world. But there's very few areas where there's high grade silver, and that's in friendlier jurisdictions. And I think that silver, when there's interest again in the gold market, there's going to be interest again in the silver market, and it's there's very few silver exploration. As Eric Sprott just, said recently, which I agree with him, there's very few high grade silver stocks, especially in mining friendly jurisdictions. And when that comes back into flavor again, that's going to be pretty exciting. And I think that the silver market is technically it's setting up for a big move. So once, I like the Keno Hill area. I think that Alexco, and I know that not everyone's a fan of the Yukon, but that's one area where you have extremely high grade silver. And I think with the uncertainty in South America right now, there may be some money coming back into the Yukon.
Yeah, Alexco has been that's been a huge winner in the last 12 months or so. It has corrected a little bit, so I mean you're getting a better entry point now if people want to take a look at that.
Yeah, silver. And the battery metals. I'm looking at it is every couple of years you have big runs in the battery metals and then huge corrections. And right now we've had since I think February of 2018. A correction in all those lithium and cobalt and battery metals. But, Tesla's finally showing a profit. The companies are 2020 models might be coming out. There may be some 10 baggers there, but that's a contrarian call. And really to get those big wins, you got to buy when everyone else is kind of negative on it.
Right. And so let's talk about increasing your odds and some of the things that we can all look for to increase our odds. I think you already mentioned about management and their, having a track record and credibility with institutions so they can do a big raise in the future. What are some of the other things that you look at when you're investing in these early stage type of deals?
It's really the management, the track record, the share structure. Try to avoid companies that have debt. um, the ability of management to raise money, uh, and the asset. The asset is critical, but you also have to have a team that has a confidence that can raise money and that can build market value in the retail marketplace. That's very important. So it's not just a company that's going to put out a news release, but that the CEO is actively, telling the story. You do have to look for companies in the mining market that the CEO is actively marketing and telling the story.
Yes, I would say management, especially when you're looking at early stage, management is probably even more important than I'd say that's when it's the most important compared to when the company is, they're already operating or they're already in a somewhat healthy position with a project. They're not going to die off in the next 6 or 12 months. How about management and insider ownership, Jeb? Because it seems to me, I mean, we don't think about it as obvious, but in looking at various companies in all stages, I mean, we know that when management and insiders have such a strong position, they're positioned alongside you. I mean, when they have a big position, they want it to be successful and they want the stock to go higher, and they can't, dump the stock when it goes higher because they own such a huge position. So it's an obvious thing, but I don't know. In my case, sometimes I'm overlooked that. I mean, it's not to say if a company, if management only owns 3 or 4%, it's not to say it can't be successful. But when you're looking at early stage, smaller juniors, micro caps, nano caps, if management does not own a big position, then they're probably just doing it for a paycheck.
And that's why you have to look at the insider filings on CEDAR. And if you follow me on social media, I follow that a lot. And, insider buying and insider selling. And also if the insiders are participating in the private placement, which they have to disclose. That's a very important question that investors should ask. Are insiders participating? And how much do insiders own? And what did the insiders pay for the stock? You also have to look at the options, where they were granted options, what price, where's the average weighted option. So that way, at least you're getting some metrics and some target prices, as an investor. So those are very important tools, and I'm glad that you brought it up. And that's some of the things that I follow too, is the shares outstanding, the warrants, the options, and how much insiders own, and also the funds. You can look at especially the U.S. listed ones. You can see the holdings and the funds increasing, and that sometimes you can see a big share rise when you see an institution buying in the marketplace.
Right. Yeah, very important stuff to look at. Okay, Jeb, you've covered a lot, but I think you kind of dodged my question at the beginning about your biggest 10 bagger, because you gave us a pick already, but why don't you just let us know about maybe your biggest win or one of your biggest wins?
I'm going to give you a couple because, I'm going to give you a couple throughout my career.
And could you tell us at least what you learned from that, how that's helped your investing from after getting that big win?
Well, one that I followed throughout the 2000s and was a big win was Frontier Gold, and they were bought out by Newmont for 2 point some odd billion. And I was a shareholder, and I wrote about it on my blog. So that's where I first sort of got my subscriber following. And then I did back then in that cycle New Gold, which probably I started writing about it below $1. It eventually, became a very big stock. I think $14, $15 it reached at the peak. And they bought Rainy River and Blackwater, and they had a big run. Tower Hill Mines was one that I followed for many years. That was the last cycle. After the bear market, one that I did very well on was Nile Corp, Western Lithium, back in 2015, and then Integra Gold, which was I got in when it was between 15 and 20 cents when they got the Valdor property, and they did an excellent job turning that story around from pretty much a bankrupt mine to being bought out by Eldorado. I think at maybe like $1.50. So, and that was in the bear market. So both money can be made if you do your homework. It's not easy. It's much harder in a bear market, but money can be made both in a bull and a bear market. And let me make it sure, and people that are listening know that there's plenty of losses and plenty of things that have gone, in junior mining when you take chances like this. Like Babe Ruth, he hit the most home runs, but he struck out a lot. Sometimes, when you take big bets into exploration or into, development, there are a lot of risks with mining, and it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for quitters, and it's not for, weak-minded people. You have to be a little bit of you have to be able to handle rejection and losses and to move on and stay positive and keep your head in the game and keep on learning and get better. It's a game, and it's like poker, and you got to practice and learn, and speak to other investors and keep an open mind. Because I'm still learning, and I've been doing this 20 years, and there's like guys I speak to like you that teach me new things, or I learn the technicals, or I see the charts of, and that give me ideas, like that chart, that gold analog chart that you came up with, I think in 2015, that everyone should look at, and it was brilliant in the way that you put that together, and the gold bull markets versus historical gold bull markets, and where we could go based on historic patterns. That's very useful, and that's it's a game. It's a game that you have to keep on practicing and stay at the table and learning. And after 20 years, I'm still learning.
Well, beautifully said, brother. Thank you for the kind compliments there. But I got to tell you, I learned a lot from you. Even just in this interview, I'm going to listen to it again because as you were talking throughout the interview, there's a couple things that popped in my head, which I haven't even thought about as far as my investing. So it's just beautifully said. We're all learning, we're all trying to improve, and I'm glad that you said it's difficult to get 10 baggers and there's risk involved, and at some point you have to cut your losses. You have to have some kind of risk parameters set. This isn't. It is a form. It kind of is a form of gambling, but you have the ability to increase your odds. You have the ability to cut your losses at some point. Just a great conclusion there, Jeb. I really appreciate it. And before we sign off here, please let our listeners know where they can go to follow your work, how they can follow you on Twitter.
Okay, Twitter, it's at Gold Stock Trades, and LinkedIn, Jeb Handwerger. And I hope you follow me. That's the best way to contact me. And if you want to email me, it's info@goldstocktrades.com. Thank you, Jordan, for being here. And that was a great point at the end you made about cutting losses. And that's one thing that I'm learning, is that you have to learn how to cut your losses and let your winners run in junior mining. And that mistake I'm finally learning after 20 years. So thank you for helping me remind me on that point. Is cut your losses quickly, but hold on to your winners.
Oh, my pleasure to have you on, Jeb, and I hope we can have you back again in the months ahead, and we can talk about finding more 10-baggers.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Bagger Podcast, presented by the Daily Gold. For premium coverage of precious metals and the best junior mining companies, visit thedailygold.com/premium.